Principal Joe Hall reports her as an incredibly creative student who loves art, very caring, always making sure the people in her community feel included. So with that,
Just
Brianna,
a small it's Briella.
oh, Briella,
I just want to get it right because they're
I'm sorry,
mom's videotaping. So
folks. I messed up already. I'm sorry. Apologies, Briella.
all right.
There's no obligation to participate, but for those who are able and willing, please stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Briella. Great job.
Thank you, Briella.
Bye, Mom and Dad.
Okay, we'll get started with the public hearing. All of our folks who want to speak will have 3 minutes. When your name is called, please come up to the microphone at the table right up here. Please speak into the microphone so we can hear you. At 2.5 minutes, Emily will give you a 30-second warning. And please begin with your name and address. So we have, it looks like 8 folks who are in the room who want to make a comment, and I believe another 3 online. So we'll start with the folks in the room. And first we have Ryan Normandin, followed by Jim Murphy.
Ryan Normandin, 616 Boylston Street. Mayor Fuller has said repeatedly for her entire tenure as mayor that the Newton Public Schools are her top priority. During that same period, my colleagues have lost their jobs. My students have lost programs that they need to feel connected to school. Mental health needs have grown and supports have been cut. And now we're in the same spot again this year, and I'm forced to conclude that either Mayor Fuller has lied to her constituents over and over, or she is incompetent, unable to deliver to her constituents what she claims is her top priority, a thriving public school system. While Mayor Fuller takes an axe to the reason that people move to this city, the only people sitting here who seem to have a problem with that are Anna Nolan and Chris Bretsky. In the meantime, Paul, who boasted of his negotiation skills, had never showed up to negotiate during the strike. Barry mostly doesn't bother speaking. Rajiv suggested trying to find a middle ground with the mayor so there'd still be deep cuts, but fewer. And Tamika, who was ousted as chair last year and led in negotiations that ended in a strike, suggested that voting for a budget that would appropriately fund NPS would be performative. Your job is to get kids what they need. And if you don't think you can do that, you need to get out of those chairs. Because we are really sick of trying to do it for you. These are the people that the city of Newton has elected, all of whom ran unopposed. I'm a Newton voter, and I am ashamed and embarrassed by our elected officials, except Chris, who is the only one who hasn't given up. I am begging the people of this city to pay attention to this year's annual Fuller manufactured crisis, because this is the price of apathy. Nothing is going to change if we continue to elect people who do not understand schools, who do not care about schools, and who feel no responsibility to even show up or speak, let alone fight for our kids. Whether you care about your kids' experiences in school or your property values or that this community has been built up around its schools, we all need to get involved. We can do better than this committee, which has overseen disaster after disaster while Fuller steals from the schools to fund her free cash surplus. We deserve better than this committee. And so my question, my challenge to the voters of Newton is to show up and work for it. This mayor's legacy will be her callous disregard of the Newton Public Schools. And if we do not start showing up, it will be our legacy as well. So please, show up and save Newton and public schools before there is nothing left to save. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next commenter is Jim Murphy, followed by Jane Franz, and then we'll move to some of our online folks, Stephen.
Hi, Jim Murphy, 43 Rowan Street. I want to come here to ask the committee to pass the superintendent's budget at the way that she has proposed it, rather than what I've seen discussed of further cuts. I've been watching some of the hearings online, and it's incredibly frustrating to watch the committee kick the can down the road, particularly on special needs students, particularly our younger special needs students. We all know that if we want to keep the costs of those things down, we need to make sure that we intervene early and that we do so effectively. And yet what I've been hearing has been precisely directed at cuts or not funding those precise things that will keep those costs down. I'm going to keep this short, and there are a number of other issues that I think are, kind of worth commenting on, but I think that's the obvious one, right? If we don't fund this stuff now, it will cost more later. It will cost more in-class supports. It will cost more in outplacement. And so to say that we don't have the money now ignores the real question. And so I'm asking this committee to fund the budget as proposed by the superintendent. I don't like the budget proposed by the superintendent. I don't think it's adequate. And I think, it's a demoralizing one as it is. But what the situation needs right now is not just acquiescing to what the city has put forth. The education system in the city needs leadership. That's you. And I'm asking you to vote for that budget. Thank you.
Thank you. The next commenter is Jane Franz, and that will be followed by our virtual folks. We have Sue Cohen, Mally Brott, and Donna Thayer.
Good evening. My name is Jane Franz, and I live at 12 Glastonbury Oval. I'm here tonight to talk about the implications of a budget constrained by the mayor's allocation. My concerns relate to the cost to the staff, parents, and students, specifically the loss of trust in the school system that's a direct result of underfunding the school budget for 5 years. The constant drip, drip, drip of cuts known among staff as death by 1,000 cuts has left the system at a tipping point. The previous superintendent's imposition of initiatives without proper preparation or resources, the loss of support services as student needs continue to rise, the increase in high school class sizes, the lack of funding for basic maintenance that no one would or should have to put up with in the workplace are just a few examples that have resulted in a significant loss of trust amongst all stakeholders. Unilaterally breaking the contract for the kindergarten aides has resulted in a loss of trust for the entire NPS staff, well beyond the kindergarten teachers and those who lost their jobs. While our form of government places a great deal of power in the mayor's hands, it's unprecedented to use that power to promote a singular goal when making minor adjustments would allow the school system and the city to move past austerity budgeting. There's nothing magical about the year 2032. Insisting on sticking with that date to fund pension liabilities while making essential cuts has resulted in a belief in the community that the city leadership doesn't understand the effect these cuts will have on elementary students for the next 7 years, or middle or high school students for their final 4 to 6 years. That may be a dispute, that you may dispute this belief, unfortunately, is beside the scared, and with good reason. Scared for their country, for the city, but most importantly, for the future generation of children. Precarious times require the city leadership to adjust their vision and do what's necessary to get this system and the city through this period. To the school committee, your role is first and foremost to fight for the needs of students.
You have 30 seconds.
I urge you to use your voice and their city leadership position to amplify the current unacceptable budget situation. This does not need to be our reality. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Stephen, we'll move to our folks who are making virtual comments. First is Sue Cohen.
Okay. Hi. Good evening. My name is Sue Cohen, and I reside at 124 Mount Vernon Street. Thank you for this opportunity. First, a few notes from the U.S. Department of Ed's 2020 study regarding students' mental health needs. And I quote, even before the pandemic, as students entered their K-12 school experience, schools were reporting earlier onset, increased prevalence, and greater intensity and complexity of student mental health needs. Researchers suggest that children's experiences, even in the earliest stages, affect their social, emotional, and behavioral development. Supporting students' social, emotional, and behavioral development at early ages may mitigate the need for long-term services and supports. Second, I would like to applaud and thank you, Superintendent Nolan, for recognizing the critical need, as well as the legal obligation to keep the kindergarten aides in the proposed budgets. I would also like to commend you, Mayor Fuller, for calling out the cannabis businesses that have violated their host community agreements with the city. And by refusing to make their final payments to the city, they are breaking their contractual obligations. That is what you said. I agree with you, Mayor Fuller, that violating a legal contract is illegal and just plain wrong. But here's my dilemma. By violating the contract with the NTA, by not rehiring the kindergarten aides, you are doing the same thing you are accusing the cannabis businesses of doing. The 2019-2020 Memorandum of Agreement, Article 19, Full Day Kindergarten, Section 2, Staffing Levels reads, every kindergarten classroom with 14 or more students shall be assigned at least one full-time Category 1 kindergarten teaching assistant. This teaching assistant shall be distinct from and in addition to any other special education aides that may be assigned to particular students in the classroom. How can you, Mayor Fuller, accuse the cannabis companies of breaking their contractual obligations while the school committee is doing the exact same thing? My expectation as a taxpayer and as a longtime NPS educator is that the school committee will immediately honor their contractual commitment to NTA by adding the kindergarten aides back into the classrooms and keeping them in the future budgets. And the good thing, as I understand it, is that you can actually this can be done, putting the K aides back now, while you are waiting for your second appeal to not employ the contractually agreed upon K aides. It's time, school committee, to do what is legally and morally right. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next virtual commenter is Molly Brott, followed by Donna Thayer.
Molly Broad, it's 10 Charlotte Road. The rising costs of special education are closely tied to your continued refusal to adequately fund general education, particularly the multi-tiered systems of support. This approach is ultimately leading to increased costs, not savings. A critical example of this is the continued resistance to funding contractually mandated kindergarten aides. Providing these essential supports to our youngest students, helping them to develop important behavioral and emotional management skills sets the foundation for their future success. Without these supports in place, we risk creating long-term challenges that require more extensive and expensive interventions as students progress through school. The school committee must support the superintendent's proposed budget and push back against further cuts that threaten to strip away vital support for general education. The future of our students depends on these investments, and you have the power and the responsibility to make decisions that support our children's success and prevent even higher costs down the road. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Our final virtual speaker is Donna Thayer.
Hi, thank you. I live at 138 Warwick Road in West Newton. Thank you so much for your time. I'm a second grade teacher at Mason Rice and in my 22nd year teaching in Newton. I'm speaking with you tonight to ask you to reject the mayor's current budget. As a resident of Newton, I've heard people say that the mayor is fiscally conservative and therefore fiscally responsible. I would argue that it's time to be humanely responsible. My students, other students, the children of Newton are struggling with increased mental health and behavioral issues. Students as young as first grade talk about suicide. Students younger and older hurt themselves, hurt others, and hurt staff, often in front of the rest of their class. When these things occur every day in at least one, if not 20 classrooms across our 15 elementary schools, we can call for help. The dysregulated student needs help, as well as the rest of the class who feel worried, scared, and unsafe. The help that arrives is often in the form of our social emotional support personnel who calmly arrive to de-escalate challenging situations. If you approve the mayor's budget, you are giving a green light for many of these SEL personnel to be cut, as well as to place students in classes with up to 25 students where they will get less attention. You are basically abandoning our neediest students. In addition to teaching, I'm also a member of our Mental Health Joint Labor Committee. I'm one of just 2 classroom teachers on a committee filled with amazing mental health professionals from preschool through high school. I've learned through them about the many struggles students face on a daily basis as they move from preschool to elementary to middle school and then to high school. There's an incredible amount of unmet need across our district that can only be met by increased staffing as represented in Superintendent Nolan's Thrive budget. We need more mental health support, not less. When student mental health needs are not met, they're not present to learn. They are unable to learn, actually, and their classmates' learning is often impacted as well. Please do the right thing. Reject the mayor's budget. Press the mayor to make student mental health her first priority, and then back that up financially. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. We'll move back into the room, and our next speaker is Enrique Rosero, followed by Bruce Hedison.
Enrique Rosero, 19 Garland in Newton, Massachusetts. Here we are again in this regime of austerity, back to making cuts to our children's future. I watch this board touting their managerial and financial skills, failing year after year to secure enough resources to at least maintain base level services for our kids. That's simply what our superintendent recommends, not more, and is what you should support as well. Instead, we've only watched you ask what else can be cut. The representative from Ward 1 suggested last Monday that you could pass a budget with a $4.5 million deficit without specifying the cuts in hopes to, quote, manage the whole. Sir, I bought you a lottery ticket to help you with that plan. The representative based out of Europe went further. Mr. Levy suggested removing from the budget the over $800,000 required to fulfill your contractual obligation of providing kindergarten aides. What's more, reading the Q&A document, Mr. Levy asked, and I'm gonna quote from page 10, quote, is it prudent to consider a further reduction of elementary school teachers with a slightly larger impact on class sizes? End quote. No, Mr. Levy is not prudent. But cutting 10 more teachers isn't enough for him. Voting against endorsing the override isn't enough for him. So when does it end? You are elected officials entrusted with advocating for our public schools. You are not management consultants. I wish you at least voted in support of the level service budget our school needs. Ideally, you will also publicly and vocally advocate for the changes needed to stop starving our schools. But it's clear for all that happened, we are going to need a new school committee to do this job. Thank you.
Thank you. Next in the room is Bruce Hedison, followed by Jenna Stein.
Good evening. My name is Bruce Hedison, and I reside at 207 Waverly Ave. With over 33 years of experience as an educator in a neighboring town, I am deeply invested in the quality of education that we provide for our students here in Newton. I am here in front of you today to express my profound concerns regarding the proposed budget by NPS. Superintendent Ann Nolan requested a budget to address the pressing needs of our schools. I feel that that budget isn't even enough. I sat in on all 3 of the budget hearings, and I heard from all the department heads and the assistant superintendents. They were transparent, they were honest, they knew their buildings, they knew their staff. with the 33 years of me working in Hudson, I was also union president. I had to sit in on budgets. I have never met such competent administrators. And I really feel that if these cuts are made, it's going to be detrimental to our system. Now, the Mayor Fuller's budget has a shortfall of $4.5 million that Superintendent Ian Nolan has presented. And I truly feel with the money that the city has and what the money takes in, that money can be found. And it has to be a priority because we are finally getting close to, with the challenges of COVID-19 in the classroom. We still have the older years in elementary, in the middle school and the high school, still feeling the effects of it. We need to be there for them in the classroom. We need to get them caught up. It is not fair what happened. And I realize there were situations that went on, but we just need to move forward from today and be there for our kids in this community. And I am just really, really hoping that this board puts through the superintendent's budget. And of course, we would always love to see a little bit more money go towards that also, because this is our future. And I mean that. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next commenter is Jenna Stein, followed by Samantha Janier.
No problem. Hello, my name is Jenna Stein. I live at 11 Glastonbury Oval, and I am a proud parent of a 4th grader at Service and a 7th grader at Oak Hill. I'm here today to urge you to fully fund the budget that Dr. Nolan has put forward for the Newton schools. In 2020, when the COVID pandemic struck, Newton Public Schools struggled far more than other districts that were more prepared and more adaptable. It is now clear that this was not just a crisis response issue, it was the result of years of severe underfunding. For too long, our district has operated on budgets that have forced schools, teachers, and students to make do with less, weakening the foundation of our education system. The previous administration did not advocate for the resources our schools needed, merely accepting the budgets that were handed down year after year. This approach has left Newton schools stretched too thin, failing to provide the support our students deserve. Recognizing the need for a leader who would fight for our children's education, the district, all of you, sought out the best possible superintendent, and you found Dr. Nolan, and now you're not letting her do her job. Dr. Nolan has spoken clearly about the systemic underfunding and deep gaps that it has left in our school. She has been tasked with solving these challenges, but she cannot do it without the budget necessary to make real change. Year after year, Mayor Fuller underfunds our schools, only for the city to then later reveal a surprise surplus in municipal funds. This pattern must end. Beyond the classroom, the strength of Newton schools directly impacts the strengths of our city. Families move to Newton because of its reputation for excellent public education. When our schools decline year after year due to underfunding, fewer families choose to move here. Enrollment declines and our community as a whole suffers, including property values. Simply put, strong schools make a strong city. Unfortunately, because our schools have been underfunded for more than 5 years, we are now in a position where we must invest more to get back to where we need to be. If we continue to delay, the cost, both financial and educational, will only grow. The budget Dr. Nolan has proposed is not extravagant, it is necessary. Now is the time for the school committee to demonstrate its commitment to the families and students of Newton. Your role is not simply to accept what is given, but to advocate for what is right. Fully fund the budget and ensure that Newton students receive the education they deserve, because our children, our teachers, and our entire community depend on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next in the room is Samantha Junior, followed by Christine Dutt.
I'm Sam Janier, 121 Waltham Street. I'm a Newton resident, an MPS parent, and a middle school teacher. I'm here to speak for the voices that haven't been heard, and that's our middle school students. I hear over and over from Dr. Nolan that we want our students to thrive. But right now at Day Middle School, we are just struggling to survive at the current levels we have. With the anticipated budget allocation and the loss of FTA teachers at Day, surviving is not looking good. For years, we've been asked at the middle school level to do more with less. We are not the shining star of the high schools where we can march the graduates out going to Princeton and Yale. We're not the very focused elementary schools with parents laser focused on whether their kids can read. We're the kids in the middle. And over again, we're the forgotten step-sibling. We've been asked to be the relief valve to make sure that elementary schools get what they need and the high schools get what they need, and we're just gonna make do. Right now, I'm not surprised the middle schools are struggling. I'm surprised we've lasted as long as we have. I've been here since 2003, and I've watched year after year after year. Things get taken away, kids get less, and we're surprised at the results. At Day, we have the largest teams in the district at the 6th grade level. It was a known factor that these kids coming in for this 6th grade class were going to be very needy, very high needs IEPs, 504s that are written like IEPs, and then as the sorting hat of middle school, figuring out who needs more help, who are getting undercover help in elementary schools, in co-taught classrooms, and just under the table. It's been disheartening to see that another middle school who's having a needy group come in, having their FTEs saved.
You have 30 seconds.
When we didn't get it. We cannot carry on. If you want us to thrive, you need to give us the money to do it. We are not going to survive. We are not going to thrive, and we are in a crisis. We need something to be done now.
Thank you. Next in the room is Christine Dutt, and then we have two late entries here, one in the room, Allison Zacharek, and one virtual, Jenna Mayera.
Good evening. My name is Christine Dutt. My address is 13 Crescent Street in Newton. I have an 8th grader at Day and an 11th grader at North. First, I want to acknowledge the many hours and the immeasurable amount of work and care that's gone into the budget and presenting the budget to the public thus far. I'm grateful for the work of all of the MPS employees, especially the central staff, and to Dr. Nolan. I especially want to thank Dr. Nolan for her advocacy this year. It's a change of pace in Newton, and it's welcome. Nevertheless, we find ourselves in a less than service budget year again. Again, we have a structural deficit in the school's budget. We've heard Chair Bresky say we should modify the OPEB and the pension obligation payment schedule to find the money to close the deficit. The mayor says we need an operating override to do the same thing. I'm sure that members of City Council have their own opinions on how to do that work. The thing is, Newton's been in this situation for years. And every year the structural deficit is not addressed is another year the education and the needs of every NPS students are compromised. Newton earned its national reputation because of its focus and its hard work to put students and student needs first. I fear that as a district, that's not what is guiding us today and not what is guiding this budget process and the allocation process. Admittedly, having a less than level service budget's gonna be a struggle to put Newton students first. However, the conversation around the budget and every budget going forward needs to recenter NPS students and student needs at its core. Mayor Fuller, I know that one-time money is not going to fix our chronic issues. I urge you to find additional funds for NPS this year. And I want to emphasize that failure to do this, to have adequate funding year after year, adversely impacts every student.
You have 30 seconds.
Elected officials, school committee members, Mayor Fuller, and city councilors, if you're listening, it's time to work together and agree on a path that implements multiple strategies to increase the NPS budget to get us out of the structural deficit and on a path to restoring all the items that have been cut. You're going to have to collaborate and compromise. You're going to have to be flexible and creative and bold. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Our last speaker in the room this evening is Allison Zacharek. And then that will be followed by Jenna Miara, who's remote.
Any microphones?
Yes, anyone's fine.
Oh, okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Allison Zacharek, 259 Cherry Street. I have one daughter at Franklin Elementary in first grade and a son who's entering kindergarten next year. I was not planning to come and speak tonight. I was just going to listen, but I feel passionate, so decided to take a moment. Schools are why we moved to Newton a couple years ago. The number one reason we left Cambridge was we wanted great schools. And last year when the whole budget crisis opened up, I was shocked that the city that is known for incredible schools and how much we care about our students was having this struggle. I had no idea moving here that this had been an ongoing challenge. And similar to what the last speaker said, I'm fearful that we might be at a tipping point where our schools are no longer going to be what we want them to be, and a place that people move, they want to move to this city to be a part of the schools. I don't know all the details of exactly the creative ways to solve this, but I wanted to share two things. One, I think personal attacks are not going to solve this, and I know that there have been a lot of those in the last year plus, and I feel for all of you who have suffered those. I know everyone at this table has, and that hurts, and that does not help adults with problems collaborate and work through difficult challenges like this. So I wanted to say I see you, and I see how hard this is, all of you. I also wanted to share that the school committee and the city hired Dr. Nolan for her expertise, and I've been very impressed by her analysis, use of the facts, communication, and I am very excited about the budget she has put forth. And I wanted to come and share with the school committee that we as a community support you in supporting Dr. Nolan, who you hired to tell us what the schools really need. I know it's not easy to figure out how to get the budget, but I implore you to work together, to be creative, to figure out how we can do this. Thank you.
Thank you. Our last commenter this evening is Jenna Miara, and she is virtual, Stephen. And apologies if I butchered those last names there.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jenna Myra, 842 Chestnut Street. I am deeply grateful to have received an exceptional education in Newton and proud to have a 5th grader at Ainger and an 8th grader at Brown. As many have already pointed out this evening and elsewhere, the mayor's current proposed allocation will require cuts to school services and staff in a system that's already close to the bone. I truly believe we can do better, and I'm here to encourage all of you on this committee to continue to work hard to do just that. Members of this committee and others have identified different fiscal choices that could better support our students without harming other constituencies. In the interest of our students and our community, we need this committee to be persistent and creative advocates for different choices and for a hopeful future for our schools where all of our students thrive. I urge you to approve the superintendent's thoughtful, realistic, and transparent budget, which already contains meaningful cuts and compromises and reflects the bare minimum of resources needed to maintain base level services for our students. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That is all of our speakers for the budget public hearing. So we will conclude that part of tonight and move on to our regularly scheduled meeting. We do have,
Surprise.
we're not done yet, Stephen.
Way to make an entrance.
We do have two items on a consent agenda this evening, or just one, I guess. That's fine. We'll table that for, yep, that's fine. We can table the consent
They're in the
agenda
packet,
piece
so.
for,
Yeah.
it's not going to kill us if we
Okay, whatever.
approve meeting minutes next. Yeah. So why don't we put that on the agenda for the next regularly scheduled meeting, Lisa? Okay. We'll move on to the superintendent's report, I guess. Yeah, well, why don't we do that?
Okay. So school committee members have been giving us questions for analysis, and there were 3 key follow-up pieces that I just wanted to make sure everybody knew what they had. So last time, 2 meetings ago, there was a request for, after Dr. Roundtree spoke, what would the full mental health slate of services be that would be recommended? And I want everyone to know that we are actually in some very productive joint labor management negotiations now. It's not interest-based bargaining, but it's sort of a hybrid between negotiations that we all heard about last year and collaborative work. I have the pleasure to serve on the mental health working group with Casey Noe Miller, the Director of Student Services, and that's co-chaired by NTA President Mike Zillis. So you had before you in a packet from last week just what that group has talked about thus far. I believe Emily asked, what do those programs look like? You asked for some rough cut cost estimates. We gave you that. Please know it's a very rough cut. The group had not intended to give you recommendations this year. They knew that we would be working towards recommendations for next year, but there's emerging topics. You have that document. I'm not going to present on it. It has, though, costed out the cost of Bright services, which is step in, step out, hospitalization, social emotional support programs that many schools have, which allows students a sort of sheltered re-entry into classes after mental health situations, and also precludes or heads off mental health issues by providing a different type of learning environment prior to a hospitalization. So that's in there, as is a model for a stabilization type model akin to that which already exists at the elementary level, so that when there are deep crises, you heard one public speaker speak about young people threatening harm to themselves, we have a rapid response team at the elementary level that can respond. We do not have such a option at every level. So those items are there for your discussion. I'm making no formal recommendation on that, given the budget situation that we are currently in at this time. The second part that is before you tonight, and there's actually slides to this effect, so I don't know, Stephen, if you want to tee up that PowerPoint. Members had asked for 2 pieces of information. One, sort of return on investment report around the MTSS investments. Thank you, Stephen, that we made last year. So with deep gratitude, the Education Stabilization Fund, conceived by the mayor, approved by City Council, has allowed us to make some pretty significant Tier 1 upgrades to the Newton Public Schools program. When we talk about all the needs of students, this first tier need of building a classroom that has certain resources and allows us to meet the needs of students as they emerge within the general education realm is what we're talking about here. So I do have our director of MTSS, Maria Colby, here. I thought I saw her. Yes, there she is. We're not going to present a lot of information here, but you asked, what did we get for the investments that we put in last year? I want to tell you that today, led by Dr. Farag, the elementary assistant superintendent, we did our mid-year state of the schools data analysis, which the investments you've allowed us to make in the ecosystem for data-driven monitoring of student performance and intervention supports, which Maria is going to talk to you about now. In the 5 highest need schools, so not using a headcount model, but looking at last year's data and saying who needs the most intervention real time. We heard reports on that today, and Maria is going to tell you a little bit about sort of the big news out of the state of the school. So hit it, Maria.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you all for the opportunity to be here today. I'm very thankful for the opportunity to be able to, as Dr. Nolan was saying, just talk about our very exciting work. So you have a full impact report in front of you. I'm certainly not speaking through that, as Dr. Nolan mentioned, but I'm just going to give a few highlights and then answer any questions that you all have. So the information shared tonight is going to show the impact, the rates of improvement for students as a result of the 5.0 FTE that we deployed very strategically at the elementary level last year. But it's really important to note, just to start, that the FTEs alone would not give the impact that you're going to see today. Looking from an MTSS lens, and is really to be able to say that we're balancing those FTE recommendations alongside very strategic ways of setting the conditions for those positions to have the impact that we want to see. So this slide illustrates just some some amount of, and there's many more, but of some of the district condition setting work that we've done. Related, and then there's so many more even on the building level related to specific curriculum resources, communication flow, collaboration structures within the building, progress monitoring, fluency, but that any FTE increase that is recommended coming out of a strategic MTSS outcome measures will be accompanied with that condition setting work so that we're able to see what we really want to be seeing. So some of the highlights that are in a longer report in front of you, we have some really exciting quantitative impacts, and it's really important to note that these are quantitative impacts that are only able to be reported because of our benchmarking system and our system EduClimber that allows us to really, for example, these data points are looking at students that are receiving targeted interventions within the system. And so we're able to look at those students as a subset and be able to analyze their specific rates of improvement to be able to look at, to be able to present this data for you today. So a reminder, these data points are just our 5 high need schools, but some of the broad takeaways here, there are absolutely higher rates of growth for students receiving targeted interventions compared to what we would expect to see. So there's many data points. There's 2 on this slide that illustrate this. So one of the main ones being that within EduClimber, we get a lot of wonderful data support to be able to make data-informed decisions. And we get a wonderful rate of improvement, expected rate of improvement, when we put in baseline data for students. And so of the students in those 5 high need schools that are receiving interventions, 71% of students are exceeding the typical ROI. And that is how you close achievement gaps. When we want to meet the ROI at the very least, but we certainly, when we go above that, that is how we are closing gaps for students. So
And
that's
just
really
for
exciting.
people listening at home, ROI is not return on investment like it is in a finance world. It is rate of improvement.
Yeah.
And there are certain grade level bands of expected growth in a year, and our 5 need schools are besting that best hoped for outcome.
Absolutely. The other point there is notable because this is actually showing a growth increase of all students in these 5 high need schools. So within our iReady platform, all students that are below benchmark, not just students receiving intervention. So that they are showing from comparing to growth increases from last year to this year. All 5 schools saw a growth increase overall. So this is a really important like generalization measure when you're looking for measurable impacts to look at implementation, the success of implementation, to be able to see generalization. So that's not just students on IEPs. That means that those skills of being more data-driven, those skills of improving collaboration structures, of looking at what's happening in those inquiry cycles at MTSS meetings are having a broader impact across all student populations. All students that are within the below benchmark category, that range is 3 to 9%.
Do you want to show anything on that?
And then this is an exciting piece as well that speaks to capacity. That's all right. I could speak to it without showing it. It's all right.
I just want to blow it up.
Increased capacity. This is an example of what we see for a student intervention tracking in EduClimber. There's a lot of data points there that are, some are entered data points, some are what the system plots for us around different aim lines. That's just I pulled a random example. We have hundreds of those right now in this system. But what that slide is showing, the data point that accompanies that is to show that 90% of the intervention plans that are currently in EduClimber at the elementary level are from our 5 high needs schools. So that's a data point that shows, and that does not mean that that 5.0 FTE is entering all of them. They're not. It is the increased capacity at those schools of that FTE for all staff to be able to enter, to be able to make space, to be able to systematically track intervention in this way, but also that culture that is being set in those schools of database decision making and how it's used. You know, this is in many of our schools. We are in those 5 high need schools. You know, this level of data analysis is happening naturally at PLCs, and so when that happens, you're going to use it more because you see the impact of that. So that's one of those ripple impacts that of a quantitative data point, but that speaks to capacity building.
So we're tracking, obviously, at the central office. We're hearing, like we did all day, we heard from every group of feeder elementary schools by which middle school they feed into, to detect current patterns of functioning across student needs so that we can redeploy resources within this year to target anything that we're missing, and also to highlight the bright spots and to scale the bright spots that where we're seeing super duper results. And we're actually going to tell you about some of those super duper results in a second.
And so one other data point that isn't in this, but I just have to say it, and it's only one sentence, so it won't take too long. But one of the points for me when I was doing this analysis was that, and that we have been talking about, but it was so lovely to see so in such a quantitative way that's in your packet, is that for our grade 1 students that received intervention across these 5 schools, so students in grade 1 received targeted literacy intervention in this case, and on the iReady diagnostic in the fall scored in 2 grade levels below. 73% of those students moved in January for 3 months of instruction, so 1 cycle, moved from the 2 grade levels below to either 1 grade level or on grade level, 73%. So that is one of those like super exciting celebration moments of being able to see the what happens when we are able to provide that really targeted intervention paired with really intensive progress monitoring that allows us to make those instructional shifts to be the most impactful within a very short 3-month period of time. To see such growth was really exciting. Shifting to measurable impacts related to a special education eligibility rate. So
Maria, can I say one thing?
Yeah.
Someone had asked how soon, I think it might have been Barry, how soon can we see an investment in MTSS yielding an impact in less special education? So this was kind of like what the mayor's office was doing for Tamika this week with the finding the free cash analysis. It's a bear to try to figure that out. And we'll show you just one example or 2 examples, right?
And so, you know, to state very clearly before talking about this slide, you know, I think somewhat uniquely suited to speak to this. I'm not that removed from my dissertation a couple years, but I had the luxury of spending 3 years really studying MTSS and the intersection between special ed. Just happened to have the luxury to do that, specifically related to students with EI and emotional impairment or at risk for emotional impairment. But I can say very clearly, there's no reputable educational body or research foundation that's going to make statements around robust MTSS implementation having any sort of like transactional, formulaic transfer from special education to regular education, because it's not something that we can measure in a quantitative way. It's not predictable, and it's just not the purpose of multi-tier system of support work, is to somehow decrease special education eligibility. We know that for disability and neurodivergence is part of the human condition. I've been before you speaking to my own disability. This is not something that it is not the goal of MTSS to decrease special education. And I just want to say that multiple times throughout this. And if we are looking at measurable impacts of MTSS, strong MTSS implementation, the one quantitative data point we can look at is on initial eligibility rates. And so that's what this slide speaks to. Not to say that we expect this percentage decrease, or even looking in the aggregate, that's not something, even if we look for even larger than at the state level, or there would be no percentage that we could reliably say. However, what we can say is that within an initial implementation phase of strong MTSS framework work at the building level, we would expect them to decrease to some degree, simply because we are because of our increase in more database decision-making and more systematic and targeted intervention, because these are regular education students, some regular education students that are able to have their needs met in that proactive, data-driven way, that those students will separate themselves in this model and remain regular education students, because their gaps will close with our instruction. It is not taking away an IEP from students. It is, if we are able to see the lagging skill in September, provide the instruction, see the skill is closed, the student doesn't need to go through an eligibility process. So, or if a student is in an eligibility process while they are receiving targeted intervention, the student may not be eligible. So what I have reported here is just for the 5 schools in the aggregate, again, large scale. We are looking at and I'm going to give my caveat after I give the percentage here, but as of right now, on May 19th, there is an overall decrease from last year to this year of 53% when averaged across the 5 schools for, again, regular education students that are being found eligible for special education in a year. Now, that number is going to be higher by the end of the year. It's only March. There's many students in progress, so we can give an update towards the end of the year. But so in terms of any sort of reliable metric that we look at moving forward, I would argue this is maybe the only one we can look at in that way.
And we also have to say it's year 1 of really implementing. So I don't want to oversell the scenario, but these are real. We heard about real progress today from many different areas.
Yeah. And then just one of the other pieces, of course, I am a quantitative data person, and I will always be. And in terms of the qualitative highlights of the impact of these 5 positions, there are many. I have from interviews with individuals from my time in schools. These are the 3 strongest themes of the 5 schools. By adding that 1.0, we are giving, and every school, some even were very creative with their funds and got like a 1.2 because of who they hired for different positions. But that impact, it's about increased capacity. We know in any school, one of our greatest commodities is time. And so with any school structure. So what this position did, in addition to their direct work with students, was to free up other individuals in different roles, like our math coaches, our literacy specialists, to provide curriculum support and coaching to educators in a way they weren't able to before that position was there. By having this position paired with MTSS coach support, a day of MTSS coach support, these schools have been really tightening up their SIT process and looking at how do we collaborate, in particular for all students, but for that last, but on our multi-serve students in particular, and how does that communication flow across our different structures. And they've been able to really lean into that work by having more dedicated FTE and more and more sustained focus at a building level because of their individual problems of practice that they identified to implement the work of this FTE that they were given. So you have, again, more information in your report, but the overall impact summary is certainly when looking at rates of improvement for students within our 5 high-need schools, we saw multiple quantitative and qualitative gains that were really just exciting to see. We can say there is a positive impact in those schools with a very relatively small but mighty FTE allocation of literacy and math intervention support that schools were able to individually tailor to their own individual problems of practice. And that empowerment was so powerful. The last thing, this is a hot off the press ad from today, from our 1 to 3 o'clock. Yeah, exactly. It was our last section here. But just because this is relevant to what Dr. Nolan's going to speak to next as well. But this is an example of other impacts that come if we're looking on in our fiscal environment, ways in which MTSS can have impacts. There are going to be impacts like this one that come up, and I'll explain in a moment. They're not predictable, and they're not something that we can point to and say, here's the amount you're going to save because of X, but this is an example, and a really exciting one. So this is an example from a school, as you know, we have, the work of MTSS is happening in all of our schools. The work of MTSS is the work of directly working with meeting student needs in really proactive and strategic ways. We do have an elementary school that had started many years ago with a small group of educators and then with leadership that approached their school becoming a true MTSS, and they're many years into that work. And so this school, Ainger, and this school, as part of their presentation today, was speaking to a data point that they came up with related to promoting independence of students on IEPs and related to special education staffing. So this was, I'll explain the chart on the left, and then the second data point is really what I think has the impact here. But what this is showing is that in the year 2016, 2017, there were 26 Unit C special education staff within the school. If you look at 16, 17, 19, 20, and looking ahead, in 24, 25, the percentage of students with disabilities in their school has remained the same. But what has changed, if you look from 26 to 28, the 1920, I happened to be there for that one. That was a high staff year. They are down to 10 of special education support staff. And so this data point alone, I would argue, shows we've decreased staff. This data point next to the point on the right there makes this just truly incredible. So this data, again, fall to winter, which is really September to January. So we're talking a couple months of instruction. The students with disabilities at Ainger, looking at the aggregate, showed median growth. So the average growth for all those students was at 169%. And let me explain this a little bit. So thinking about, again, September to June, that hoped for target is 100%. So what we would hope for in January is 50%. What we know is for students with disabilities, often that those growth rates are lower. And that is how achievement gaps really persist. For this year, Ainger's iReady data from September to January, the growth rate for their students with disabilities was 169%, which means their growth was so significantly above. This is how, thinking about the work of incredibly high degrees of growth, along with lower and systematic approaches to look at how students can have those degrees of independence while also maintaining that very high growth is just a really impressive and exciting data point. And speaking to what I know you're going to be talking about much more today around the budget, this is not predictable in the sense of 5 students could move in tomorrow that need one-to-one support, and they need one-to-one support, and they're going to get that. And so, but if you look at, when we can stay big and look at trends, this is something that shows the impact of a school looking at systematic approaches to be able to meet the needs of all students when all those practices are just become part of how a school does business. these are some of the impacts that we can see. So we felt it was so powerful and and it warranted a last minute add, even though it's not related to the ask of the 5.0 FTEs, but just it is related to thinking about the impact of MTSS work over time when we think about the ways that we live all the systems and structures work, in addition to really targeted FTE and a really thoughtful FTE
Thank you.
pieces.
Terrific job. Thank you for the analysis.
Yeah.
So I'm going to talk about the second question, which is related, which was Unit C staffing. I don't know if you have questions for Maria. We will bring you some of this if you want it as part of the goals update in the spring. Just wanted to give you a teaser so you were excited for that report. I know I'm a nerd that way, but
Should we maybe pause here and
We can.
take some questions from the members? Let me just start by saying, in the 3 years I've been doing this, this is like, we've been waiting for this moment of, we sit here and you know, a bunch of us had said this over the years of just like, how do we know it's working? You know, we put these programs in place and we do all these things, and, you know, we have this responsibility as board members to take this big picture view and say things are moving in the right direction or not moving in the right direction. And, you know, it was the first question I had when I was elected and talked to David Fleischman and said, how do you know it was a good day, a good week, a good month? Like, what do you look at to measure that? This is like the most compelling thing I think I've seen in 3 years, to take one of these discrete programs and say, this is working, and it's making like this is real. These are real kids. This is real impact. This is amazing. I'm so glad.
you should walk right out that door right now.
No other
It's like
questions. Yeah,
walk.
Yeah, you know, I'm not one to sit here and like just throw effusive praise for like, oh, you know, thank you for the. This is like game changing from my perspective to see this, and the investments we're making in, you know, having these assessments and having this data-driven approach is the only way this can happen. It's the only way we can sit here and say, yes, this is working.
Right. And they're happening because of the investments that you've all made to us. So thank you for that.
So thanks for putting this together. I know it was probably a lot in a very short period of time.
Well, you know, the joy of this now is that the data is available, and we're in it, and we're reflecting on it all the time. So yes, of course, you know, it was work, and it was a welcome reflection for myself and my team.
Okay. Questions from members on Ping?
Thank you. A lot of data to digest, and as Chris just noted, and very excited to see data-based presentation, so we can be convinced by saying, well, sounds great, but how do you tell that the students made this progress? And of course, that the details still, a lot of details we cannot discuss too much. And you made one comment saying that this task job is not really reducing the special needs students. I thought if they made huge progress, 167% growth, so hopefully these students will no longer need IEP or something like very intensive, you know, support on other assistance. That will help to kind of relieve the staff to help those students who really struggling. Just explain a little bit.
Sure. So I guess what I would say to that is that a student, for a student with a disability, they should always be making higher than expected growth, because where they're starting from, because of how they qualified for services, is going to be lower. So if we want them to continue to make, to continue to close gaps in their knowledge, we need that percentage point. We need that percentage to be higher. So what I think the impact there, their IEP may shift over time as they make more growth, as it should. IEPs are living documents that should be responsive to the student. But in terms of regular education, so thinking about multi-tier systems of support as something of the structural components of MTSS support, those certainly, students with all students benefit. And, to go with our garden metaphor, which I know we went heavy on in the report, like there's no separate garden for students with disabilities. Like it's the garden. We're all in the garden. So when a school has more effective professional learning structure, students that are supported on IEPs are going to benefit from that. When a school is more data driven in how they're having conversations about student growth, students that are supported on IEPs are going to benefit from that. When planning time is used to really dig deep and backwards plan for EL so that all students access, students on IEPs are going to benefit from that. So there are many benefits related to a school being a multi-tier system of support on all subpopulations of students. But the goal is not to decrease. Like there's no amount, like some of the language in the report too is thinking about there's no multi-tier system of support structure or system that mitigates a student's neurology or a student's physical way of being. Like it's a part of the human condition. Disability is, and all the condition setting work that multi-tier systems of support set up benefit all students, including students with disabilities.
I see your rationale now. Yes. This not only focusing on one group of students or one type of students, really focusing on all students. And meanwhile, those students who probably struggling a little bit more, making more progress. Probably I should have asked this question earlier. So just briefly, how does this model work? And with this MTSS model has been working for past few years already. So just you have more teachers working with students, or you have target certain students who really need the help. But just give us a little bit brief.
So Maria, I'm just going to refer on Ping. Maria came and presented to us on, this is the pyramid, right? And all students get tier 1, some students get tier 2, and a very few students get tier 3. So what was missing before was a system where we could do the benchmark assessments and then do the intervention and measure whether they were making progress after the intervention. So it depends each session how many kids it is. But the interventionists pull small groups based on classrooms, and then they test again and then move on out of the intervention and back to general education without having to change classes or have a separate teacher or get an IEP. So it's more fluid.
That could be a very interesting discussion, probably not for today. We're talking about budget, but I'm very curious about this. Sounds wonderful and very student growth oriented, and overall students. And I'd like to learn a little bit more about this model. How, meanwhile, we're trying to help those students who really need to be helped, and otherwise they will be in very difficult situation. As you mentioned, they will further, lag behind without those intervention and assistance. But also you're helping every student, hopefully.
Of course, yeah.
And that's important because as we all learned, there's some parents saying, well, my kid is kind of gifted. Where's the support of my kid? If you putting all the resources on those so-called other students.
Yeah, Maria, can you speak about that a little bit and how we're tracking that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, and I'd be happy to come back more and talk, bigger picture anytime too. But related, yeah, of course. And specifically related to when we think about the data analysis work, for example, that came out of our mid-year review. So we have our STAR Math and our STAR Literacy data for all students. And all schools engaged in this scaffolded, we met as a whole, leadership teams went down the street, and we all were together for a formal data meeting with a specific data protocol, and then brought that data back to their schools, where they were looking not just at students that are 2 grade levels below or grade level below and looking at growth percentiles. We were looking at growth and achievement of all students, including students that were high achieving but low growth, because that is a problem that we also need to put equal attention. We need to ensure that our systems and structures are providing those students what they require as well. Because when we talk about MTSS, meaning no matter how a student walks into the school that day, they get what they need. That's all students. That's not just students who are below benchmark. So what our winter data allowed us to do is look at that. So look at those students that are, yes, high achievement, but low growth. And we need to be providing them the same level of attention and thought that we provide every other student in our school.
Thank you very much. High achieving, high performance, but low growth, that's very important concept right here. I know we don't have time to talk about more of this, but I'm glad to hear. Last quick question is, when 67% growth, meaning all students?
That's the average growth. So that means that means some students were higher to make that the average, which is also incredible.
All, I mean, if class, every student included, if this class is.
So sorry, all students with, so that last data point on the slide, all students with disabilities in the school, we would expect in January, our goal would be that they would have 50% growth for the average. And so the 169 is the average growth, which means some were a bit lower and some were a bit higher, but that average is 169.
Yeah, I'm asking about the cohort, this 167% growth. What is cohort?
All students with disabilities at the school.
Oh, all students with disabilities. Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Anping. Rajiv, then Barry, Paul, Emily.
Dr. Colby, Maria, thank you again for the empathetic presentation. Don't have a specific question, but I wanted to share very quickly a perspective with, I guess, everyone who's watching and with my colleagues here. Having spent 6 years on the board of Newton CPAC, one of the challenges that parents encountered very consistently was that there was no MTSS in place. Right? And so the only way to advocate for their students, for their children to get the services, the support that was needed was to take the path of getting an IEP, getting on, funneling into special education and getting the supports in that way. And I fully understand the goal of MTSS is not to cut down on special education. Our students are who they are and need the support. We have to meet them where they are. That said, I do think that over time, the benefits of intervening early in a very focused way, and as you laid out when you had come and spoken to us earlier in quite a lot of detail, this is an investment, right? What we end up with over the course of implementing MTSS across all our schools for a period of multiple years is that there are students who need a tier 1 or tier 2 support for a certain period of time catch up to make up for challenges they have and redefine it to continue being mainstream. There are others who are going to need tier 3 support, and we have to provide those, and we have to provide those really well. But I bring this up because in my 6 years on the CPAC board, we consistently had parents saying, I think my kid needs this, but the only way to get it is by getting an evaluation, getting an IEP, struggling through IEP meetings, and there is no other path. And there's a level of trust missing. Again, and Anna, I think you heard about it in your listening tour. At this point, parents are not sure they can get the supports for their children without taking the path of getting an IEP. And over time, I think we have to work to build that trust and say, if your child needs an IEP, they will absolutely get an IEP, but they may not need an IEP, and we have to see if an earlier intervention is going to help them. So this is, again, a much longer comment than I usually make, and it's not a question, but I want to shift this to, in terms of our thinking, is MTSS going to be a long-term benefit that makes up for the investment we put into it? And I think the answer is yes. And we have to think about it in that way. It's going to take effort and funding and support to put in place. We're going to see spiky results. We're going to see fantastic results like you just showed us. We might have years and cohorts where it's more challenging. But in the long run, I think it's an incredibly important investment in our students and our schools. So that's why I'm on a soapbox about it. And I will stop. Thank you.
Thank you. And if I could just add, yes, there will be FTE needs like what we asked for with this 5.0, but so much of this work is not FTE driven and is systems and structures driven. And so that's I think our commitment to you all that we are doing that work so that any FTE increases we do ask for will have the higher impact because we're doing the systems and structures work to set up any FTE increases we are talking about. For example, the middle school math and literacy interventionists which are not in the budget right now, but our middle school teams have done tremendous work to create the conditions so that when we are able to move forward with that, which we were hoping for was the fall, that those positions would have the same impact that we're having at the elementary level. So that's that commitment from us as well, that we will balance the FT commitment that you give us with our commitment to the structures and systems. Thank you.
Thank you. Barry, then Paul.
Thanks. Rajiv covered most of what I was going to say, but I just wanted to say thank you for addressing some of the questions that I had. And I know I had a few other questions. I assume some of those will be covered off. I hadn't followed up with you yet, Dr. Nolan, but I assume it's either somewhere else or it will eventually, which is fine. But I just wanted to say thank you for providing that information. It's really amazing to see, and I echo what Rajiv had said. And I just want to reiterate that this is an investment for MTSS, and it is vital that our budget has this as part of it. And I think this is exactly what one-time funds should be used for. So I would say that I'm strongly advocating that we use one-time funds and even suggesting that it might be multiple years of one-time funds, but the overall investment that will be made will be seen down the road. And if we are not willing to do it now, then I just am not totally clear when we would be willing to do something like this, because we continue to leave students behind. And when we have data like was shown today and seeing how just in a small example, the improvement it could make, I think we should be willing to put all our chips in that basket to make that opportunity possible for everyone.
And the answer, Barry, is some of the questions we answered in the question document, but Barry asked the question, how would a parent know if if their student was progressing in terms of literacy acquisition? And our team is working on bringing a good answer to the community, Barry, that combines all the dimensions of reading instruction. There's no one test or one data we can give you. So we love that challenge, and we're geeking out on it over here, and we'll bring it to you in a clear way.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Barry. Paul, and then Emily.
Thank you, Chris. First, I'd like to reiterate what Chris said at the outset, which is when some of us came onto the school committee and were asking why we couldn't have this kind of data and approach to measuring the effect of programs, we were often told, well, it's too complicated and can't be done. And I think you've belied that already, and I'm exceptionally pleased to see the kinds of information we're now able to get. And Maria, as you said, and Anna, as you've said, to use it in real time in the course of several weeks between the fall and the winter to take that change in formative assessments and to act on it in a true teamwork kind of way in each school and across the schools. And Maria, your point about systems and structures, of course, is exactly to that point. I'd like to follow Rajiv's point and Barry's point. And I'm asking this not to disagree with Barry about perhaps thinking about all of this in terms of one-time funds, but to think about focusing on one particular big one-time occurrence, which is to say the pandemic, which specifically affected a cohort of our children in, say, I'd say 2 to 3 grades, especially the kids who are now bridging between elementary and middle school. And Anna, when we talked about this at, I think it was the last meeting, but I'm losing track of which meeting it was. When I raised this, you said, well, I don't really want to think about this as one time because we want to have an ongoing program. But I guess I would urge you to think about, for purposes of threading this budgetary needle that we have to resolve, to think about whether that cohort and their increased needs relative to the broad base of students will in fact represent a one-time cohort moving through our system, and therefore that group of 2 or 3 grades, whatever it is, needing especially enhanced MTSS support, and whether it's possible to follow them budgetarily with one-time support, one-time financial support to enhance the services that are available to that particular group. I'm not saying that to exclude what Rajiv and Barry have suggested for the broad base of students and what Maria and you, Anna, have said for the broad base of students. But is there a way to think about that particular cohort as needing special attention over the next 4 or 5 years of their lives at Newton Public Schools and needing a burst of financial commitment for that one-time cohort? It's just a thought. I don't know if there's any merit to it relative to the overall student body. But as I say, I'm very interested in exploring. It seems to me the one area of flexibility that I'm potentially hearing from City Hall as to how we use free cash, how it's allocated. Understanding that free cash varies from year to year and isn't known until basically this time of year each year, whether it's possible to think about that cohort of students in a special way. So, Chris, that's my question. And if you don't feel comfortable answering it tonight, happy to hear at a future meeting. But if you want to give a hint of an answer, that's okay too. Thank you.
I'm not going to hint. I'm going to give you the whole thing right now. So our current 6th grade cohort.
Why am I not surprised?
Our current 6th grade cohort is a pretty complex group. You heard a teacher speak about it in public speak. Jean Roundtree put together a very comprehensive plan with Maria. We spent the whole year mapping MTSS practices in the middle school right now. An investment in, let's say, if you want to follow the 6th grade group and put resources to address that gap, those kids, remember, had almost all of their elementary schooling impacted by COVID and post-COVID learning conditions. And meaning learning to read, learning to socialize, not learning to socialize. And it's a very complex group. For example, the reduction in team at Brown, that rising 6th grade there, we heard already from Jean, that has 50 more IEPs than we've, right? 50? No, 30 more, 20 more, for a total of 50 than previous groups have had. So we're worried about that group, and we're unable to scale that program at the middle school. And by the way, these young people who are in elementary school, we'd like to not remove that support when they get up to the middle school if there's still some remediation to be done. My recommendation would be investing in MTSS in the middle school because it starts to, we would build momentum K-8. And certainly the investments in the curriculum and the data sources. So we've paid in advance for 3 years because of the mayor's grants to us in free cash last year for EduClimber, for the benchmark assessment systems, and it would just continue that momentum for this very fragile group of kids.
And just to add one point about, so the middle school had 3 working groups happening over the past 4 months with some products, just to share very quickly, that again, setting the conditions for potential literacy and math specialists to be successful. All 4 schools have figured out how to make tweaks to their current schedule. And anyone that has worked with a 6-day rotation schedule knows this is like not for the faint of heart, but every school leader and school team has figured out how to make sure that they can offer literacy and math block, not just during that middle squishy part of the day, but also during periods, so that all grades could have access. They've done that work. That's been a tremendous amount of work and a real step of alignment that is very exciting to be able to see they are ready for that. We've also identified curricula so that literacy and math lab would have that we can secure through grant funds to be able to have consistent materials for those individuals and a training plan on how they could receive that support. We've been talking about how students are found eligible through, we're in the stages of thinking like, what are those cut scores? Like how are students, eligible for those literacy and math labs in middle school? And what does that period look like for students? What are contracts that we're using so that students know really clearly how they enter and exit? So there's been a tremendous amount of work, again, condition setting, so that when those FTEs are there, we are able to go and we will we'll be able to see the impact even greater than if they were, and we could expect to have very similar data than what you're seeing right now.
Chris, just a quick follow-up, if I may. Is that okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
When we talk about structural deficits, and we've all been through those conversations, and we tend to focus on a strict accounting view of structural deficits of short-term costs and short-term revenues year by year. I think what Maria was just saying to us, if I could kind of extrapolate what she's saying, is another way of dealing with structural deficits is to actually change the structures so that the manner of delivering the service changes. She's talked about, I think very cogently, the idea of that it's not just about FTEs in any given year. It's about creating the systems and structures that make it possible for whatever number of people we have on staff to achieve better results for our students, and also potentially, directionally anyway, if not specifically, directionally reduce or bend the overall cost curve for the district by keeping more of the kids in general education rather than in the higher cost special education programs. Anna and Maria, thank you so much for making the presentation. I think it gives us a lot to think about, both programmatically and in terms of short-term and long-term budgeting. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Paul. Emily?
First, I want to say that I agree with Rajiv's and Barry's comments about MTSS. I'm a success. I've been following Maria's work when it was tiny at Ainger, and it's been amazing to see how much it's grown and sort of the fundamental impact that it is, positive impact that it is having on the district. And so to you, I say a huge thank you for all the work that you've done. It's been, what, 10 years worth of work now, I think? Yeah, it's been a long time, and it is wonderful to see that all your efforts are bearing fruit and will hopefully continue to expand and grow. See what I did there, Anna?
Good job, garden metaphor. Appreciate that.
Yeah, welcome.
Yep.
And I guess the other thing that I wanted to say is that I'm really intrigued, Paul, by your comments and the concept of funding and ways we could possibly be able to expand this program in unique ways. And I would call on the mayor also to think about those too. I think that the importance of MTSS cannot be overstated right now. So, thanks.
Okay, thanks, Emily. Any other, Tamika?
Real quick. So Maria, you had me at hello.
Yeah,
I think you had the majority of us at hello. It's clear that the hypothesis is being bolstered, carried out. You're proving the concept, which is tremendous, which is amazing. The other side of that, or the complement to that, is that there is an investment that is going to be necessary to really deploy this strategy. Interestingly, with Paul's suggestion to a targeted amount or across our district, whichever approach we land on, it's going to require some type of initial thrust of investment. We've already started it. We need more. That's clear. For me, how we get there and why it's worthy to do that is something that you've been able to demonstrate by showing the data. And I've been a member of this body for 5 years. And in all that time, I too have been asking for, how do we measure? How do we quantify? And this does just that. There were school committee members predating me and Emily and the mayor who've asked that same question. This is wonderful. This gives us the ability to see what has previously been opaque. And so, bravo, wonderful work. It's now on us to figure out, how do we do this? At what pace? When do we get to that target objective of saying, as a district, we are MTSS. This is what we do here. And working towards that goal is important. And, you know, I think 10 years is a long time. I don't know how much longer before we're there, but we're on our way.
So in your materials, because you asked for it, you got a Gina-like chart saying when we think we are reaching nirvana.
Thank you.
Right. And the idea being that, you know, those initial few years is when that's when those influxes are needed, because we're fixing structural deficits. We're fixing holes. And then what we see we have some elementary schools now and we'll be in year 4 of next year of, again, that really targeted work of doing their schools in MTSS. They're in those reflection and implementation cycles, but what they're implementing are more targeted, it's still very impactful, but they're not we need to fix X types of pieces, right? They're refining because we've taken those big structural challenges. We think last year about the shift in schedule at elementary. That was an incredible structural shift. We don't need to do that again. We did that. We need to tweak and we need to look at it and we need to continue to grow. But it's those initial pieces are when those larger, the 5.0 FTE, what we're talking about at middle school with interventionists, because we don't have any. We don't have the specialists there. So if we think about, or we have a very small FTE, but they're not consistent. They're not able to be done. Students do not have equitable access. So those are those initial big asks. And then we shift to the more, we're still reflecting and implementing, but the barriers become smaller. I think over a couple years of time. I don't think it's particularly much longer than that. And then that adaptive work as school leaders happens of shifting the structures and systems and the mindset work over time. And that's the work we're here for, and it's already happening, and we're ready for that. So I think this is that pain point maybe of some of these larger purchases.
Just one example of how this has happened within a couple year period. And I do want to acknowledge that individual teachers in schools, and you know, Aisha is a thin woman because she ran around for many years trying to make it all happen, like across all 15 elementary schools. We don't want to leave it to the will and interest of particular principals and teachers. We want to make this the way Newton Public Schools does business. And so in order to do that, what we heard today, which was one of the most, I was very teary during this moment, but a teacher said, you know, the second grade learned something about their data. Correct me if I'm wrong, if I say this wrong. but they learned about their data. And instead of asking for intervention support, they all flexed their schedule to provide tier 2 intervention in the gen ed classroom because the need indicated they should do it, and they did it. And that sounds simple, like that's what all teachers do, but when you have a vast amount of needs and you're not sure what to do, and you're not being targeted, you don't do it. And so I feel like we cleared up some opaqueness for teachers. They then took up the mantle of taking the responsibility and didn't say, I need another body to do it. These are my kids. I'm doing it. I don't know if you,
Yeah,
I
no,
mean,
that's
that's
right.
pretty
Yeah,
much
no.
what it was. And I was like, I'm out. That's it. I'm going. So it was a good day. Good.
Any other questions? All right, why don't we move on then?
Okay. This is much shorter if you want it to be. So I'll just share my screen one more time. You have in your packet.
Thank you, Maria.
Thank you, Maria, very much.
Thank you.
You have in your packet just a couple slides on the question was, enrollment has dropped. You still have a lot of paras, Unit C folks. And I should say to those watching, there's various types of Unit C membership. Super important in our school system. So when you're hearing about in-class supports, there's a variety and a spectrum. Unit C provides a lot of that. There's different types. We have different grades of paras, and we have something called behavior technicians. So when I was a teacher, we didn't even have BTs. That was not a thing. But we do have them now, and they provide various behavioral interventions throughout the system. So if I'm looking at general staffing, I also gave you a chart last time, which is labeled, it's a spreadsheet, and it gives you an overview, changes you asked. Since 2019, what has the staffing change been up through FY26? So you have all the staffing changes there in student services, and actually everything. You have general ed and student services, and it's broken out in two parts. So in terms of general education staffing, despite the much ado made about additions through COVID learning, which, by the way, the most challenging time of learning in our lifetime, change since 2019 overall is 1.62 FTE in this district in general education. So I'm sure there were puts and takes, cuts and additions, but even with adding the full day kindergarten aides and 32 positions last year, Gen Ed has only increased by 1.62 FTE since. So where is the bulk of our resources going, though, I would ask? And there's a high level of knowledge about how many paraprofessionals we have in the district by the average citizen. So lots of folks know, because if you get on the DESE website, Newton far outpaces any other district in terms of the number of Unit C paraprofessionals that they have. I too had this question when I came. So the member question, of course, was why are there so many Unit C employees, and what's the change since 2019? So here are the stats. So there were 89.4 increased positions in student services of all types. Now, remember, student services, when Casey No Miller presented recently, is guidance counselors, social workers, school psychologists, and all of the positions, general ed and not general ed, including college counseling. So we have 24 schools / program sites. So I'm going to say that because we have schools, and then we have Central High School, and we have other programs, bless you, that are not physical structures, but they are schools. So 24 program sites. This excludes the preschool. So I'll stick the preschool over here. Since 2019, 15.38 additional counselors, social workers, and psychologists were added. Remember last year during the strike, lots of social workers were added. Also, since 2019, 50 program-specific assigned paraprofessionals for the 5 sub-separate intense special needs programs. So not placing students out, creating the in-house programs, so that might come with fewer teacher FTEs, but it comes with more para FTEs, and we have more programs. And since 2019, we have had 5. And I'll tell you what that's all about in another slide. We also had 14 teachers related to these same programs. So 5 programs, 14 teachers. So roughly 2 and change FTE per program. All given the number of students, very reasonable ratios and required by the Department of Education. 10 related services, incremental FTEs added. This is a variety of things. We actually had to dig pretty hard to find out what this was because it was different things over time. it has been incremental FTEs to address existing. So we have current speech, OT, PT, BCBA, which is behavior, board certified behavior analyst, and assistive tech staff. So they're in various partial FTEs across the system. When you add a program, you have to add services for that. I also just want to remind everyone that we still service all the private school children who we also evaluate through our psychologists who come to the schools to receive OT, PT, speech, and behavioral therapy services, even if they do not attend the Newton Public Schools. So these are included in those related services. Oops, went backwards. So then the question is, well, enrollment's dropped. Why hasn't staffing? When's this MTSS thing going to get us weaned off of special ed? We just heard not going to happen, but we can make a dent in it. So it is a large number of teaching assistants and behavior technicians in the district, 459.47 FTEs. However, of that, 202 of those FTE are one-to-one personal aids for one student, and that is the trust issue that Rajiv was speaking about. So when all you have is a hammer, everything's a nail. So parents know, you know, the way I know I can get support and I don't have to worry about it is if I ask for this level of support. Now, student has to have some needs to demonstrate that, but what if we had other tools in our toolkit? And I think that's the question that we're all asking here today, and it's nice to hear that synergy of understanding. So of the 459, 202 are one-to-one personal aids. 7 of those are what Casey told us about last year, where we don't believe that's necessary, and the parents have done a stay put where they do think it's necessary, so they refuse to sign in a new IEP, so that the one-to-one just stays, even if the student has demonstrated the independence to do without, and they are protected, and that is their legal right to do so under IDEA. In addition, out of that 459, we have 42 FTE, which we talked about, our program aides, 13.5 behavior techs. We have 5 separate intensive special needs programs, which we added the 50 paras to these programs, 14 teachers, and that leaves 201 aides that are in general education inclusion. So I want to say that that constitutes 15 paras per grade per school over our 24 sites. So that is literally 0.67 FTE one-to-one per grade in school. So when you break it out that way, so K to 12 is 13 grades and we have 24 schools, I don't see us having, given the number of sites we have to accommodate, there are a lot of general education inclusion aids because we have to create a lot of inclusion environments across many grades and across now, that said, can this be lower? Maybe. That is, I think, what we all want to explore by increasing the way we do business with our MTSS program. So thank you for asking the question, and I hope that that reduces some worry in the community that there's some boutique business going on here of students having, you know, of us creating something outrageous. I do think that, you know, post-COVID, lots of districts had an influx of behavior techs and paraprofessional increases. There were a lot of emotional and a lot of behavioral needs for young people who weren't socialized for a couple of years in social settings. So happy to answer any questions.
Rajiv, in 1 second, I just want to make one comment, Dr. Nolan, on the one thing I think you left out in talking about, yes, in general education in total, there's been roughly flat FTEs, a 1.6 increase from pre-pandemic to now. You mentioned that includes, you know, the bulk addition of kindergarten aides that happened during that time. Excluding that, between elementary and middle school, which is really where we saw all of the, almost 100% of the enrollment drop. There was barely anything in high school. Our high schools are still very full. General education staff fell 41 across elementary and middle school. And that is the effect of consolidating classrooms. Aisha pointed this out when she gave her presentation. I feel the need to mention this again because I think it is the question we still hear constantly of why is there so many staff in our buildings when we have so many fewer students? And the simple answer is those reductions are and have happened. And It just so happens there's new staff being hired for other critical needs of the students. So I just want to make that point very clear that general education teachers have declined with enrollment over the last 5 years.
Oh, I just want to, one thing I forgot that I meant to say. So in of those 201 aides that are there, in FY20, in response to the pandemic, 10 aides were repurposed to become the now general education SEL interventionists that you hear about. And they reside in general education now. So there were these student services, that too was an investment in MTSS. So these are people who help the behavior techs. They go into general education classrooms in districts that I've led in before. This is some of the work of assistant principals and vice principals, where they respond to crises with students, and then they pull students, and then they have a de-escalation time with students, and then students return to the classroom. That is now done by SEL interventionists, because we do not have assistant principals in our elementary schools. So I forgot to say that.
Rajiv, I saw you.
No, so real quick. Thank you, Anna.
Yes.
The numbers are helpful, and I think hopefully helpful to people watching and in the room. So the one other thing I think that's important to understand is, yes, Newton has a higher number of paraprofessionals than might be expected, than you might look at indexed to other districts. We also keep a lot more students in district. And that's the flip side of it, because if we didn't have some of these programs, the students would be going out of district at a much higher expense, not just in terms of tuition, but also in terms of transportation. So it's there are puts and takes. We have these programs in-house, and one of the expenses associated with them is having the incredibly kind of incredible group of paraprofessionals we have. We're there for that support. And if we didn't have the programs in-house, we would generally be looking at a much more painful number for out-of-district tuition and expenses. So, but the numbers are good to look, good to have and understand. Thank you.
Okay. Other questions for Dr. Nolan? Okay. Okay. So maybe at this time we should return to just deliberating on the budget in general, where we stand. As I said, on what's today? Wednesday? Yeah, as I said on Monday, from my point of view, there was sort of only 3 potential outcomes, or some combination of those 3, which is NPS, the district makes cuts necessary to meet the city's allocation. Or we find incremental revenue sources, which realistically we have one revenue source, or the committee chooses to move forward with a budget that is simply not matched by the allocation from the city. And then any combination of those 3 things, I think, are the 3 potential paths we can head. This was discussed before in terms of use of one-time funds. A couple of people brought it up. Those discussions have been happening between the administration and the mayor's office for weeks, or months, really, I guess, but intensively for weeks. They're still happening. I think it's fair to say there's some amount of progress there, but not the kind of progress that closes a $4.5 million or a $3.75 million deficit. But I think it's fair to say, Mayor Fuller, tell me if you disagree, that there's an agreement to continue to work on those discussions and keep working towards a solution. So why don't I open it up to members if there's thoughts to share. Obviously not much has changed over the last 2 days. I think we probably have some other incremental, Dr. Nolan has some other incremental questions that can be answered of some of the things that were brought up. I think we probably should think as well just about where we are on Wednesday. We initially were thinking about, you know, working towards a conclusion tonight, maybe a vote on Monday. I don't know if that's realistic, given just where we reside today, the level of discussions going on between the administration and the city. And I think we probably want to start thinking about pushing this entire timeframe back, so we have the opportunity to work through those discussions primarily. But with that, I'll open it up to the members to share thoughts. Emily, please go ahead.
So at our last meeting, I actually didn't say much about the budget or my opinions on the budget, the allocation, the two different budgets. So I just want to state what my feelings are at this moment. I deeply appreciate the work that Dr. Nolan put in to the budget that you have presented. I firmly believe that it is, as some of the public commenters have said, you know, the least we can do in order to support and not have a detrimental impact on the students of the Newton Public Schools. This concept of student-led vision and the student leading our decision-making, it weighs very heavily on me, because that's one of the main drivers of what I do as a school committee member. And I believe that the superintendent's budget goes a long way further than what the 3.65 allocation gives us. And I think that a 3.5% allocation is going to be very detrimental to the students of Newton. And so I deeply appreciate all the work that all the staff has put into answering all of our questions. I personally am not comfortable voting on Monday. I think have an opportunity, to quote Christine Dutt from earlier today in her public comments. It's time for us to come together and to, I don't want to use the term negotiate, but for us to have conversations between both the city side as well as the district side, and see what we can possibly come up with. I would strongly urge the mayor, and I've said this, like, I feel like for the last 5 years I've said this, because this is the truth. It comes up at almost every single budget season, which is we need the funding. The districts desperately needs the additional funding. The students of Newton desperately need the additional funding. And so I will beg again for additional funding that we desperately need. Thank you.
Thanks, Emily. Other thoughts from members? Okay. And look, folks, I mean, this is not, we're in an awkward phase in this process. We don't have to force it. If, you know, this is a, you know, let's let the process play out. We can let the process play out. We don't need to.
I just didn't have a chance to, I didn't.
No, I'm not giving you any trouble. I'm just. That's not what I meant. Rajiv and then Tamika.
But, I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that Chris, being the favorite school committee member of the NTA, did not tug at my heartstrings today. I had never expected to hear that, Chris. Thank you. This is a 180.
Thanks, Rajiv. I appreciate that.
So that aside, I wanted to clarify a little bit my comments on Monday, because I may not have articulated them clearly enough, but here's it lines up in terms of timing. We need to make a clear case to Mayor Fuller about the use of one-time funds. Any request for one-time funds, I think, has to be articulated well. I think there is a case to be made for MTSS funding, but that case needs to be made. And taking the excellent work that Dr. Colby has done and putting it into here's what we expect the benefits will be and why we consider it an investment. Paul had an interesting idea on that front. I think there are other areas where we have to make a case. It is handing over a list is not sufficient. It has to be articulated well, right? I think the other question is around kindergarten aides. That's a contingency. It may be something we want to address as a contingency, and so essentially to say this may work out one way or another. I personally believe there is a benefit to having kindergarten aides, and I had a number of concerns when we had to make the very difficult decision to not to go down to zero, but to make some like impactful changes there. That said, I think a contingency can be handled separately and outside of the budget. So that's the other thing. I would feel personally incredibly uncomfortable voting for a budget that resulted in headcount reductions. And I want to explain why. Again, very briefly, we had to do. These are our employees. These are our neighbors. These are the people who teach our kids, who have a tremendous impact on them. And those have been some of the most painful decisions that we or I have had to make as a school committee member. If we are not able to get to a balanced budget, I still would be in favor of saying, let's not make let's not make headcount reductions. Let's continue working on this, and lottery ticket or not, take some time to figure out creatively. Again, continuing to work with the mayor, the city council, looking at other sources of funding to see if we can make it through this year without having to make those reductions, because they will have a material impact. And so I think, again, making the case for more funding, particularly through the use of one-time funds through free cash, continuing to look carefully at non-headcount related reductions, if there are any left, and I know this central team has put a lot of effort into that, and continuing the negotiation and lobbying. Right? I think there's still more work to be done, more that we can put in front of Mayor Fuller that is clear, that articulates benefits, that lays out the case for why, how specific tranches of funding are going to support our students. So.
Thanks, Rajiv. Tamika?
Thank you. So I am today where Emily was last meeting on Monday with a massive headache, and so I'm not going to wax too poetic, but I do want to just give my thoughts. It is clear to everyone watching and observing this process for I don't even know how many years now, that the schools need additional funding. That short of large infusions of additional funding, we will not be able to reach our goals, reach our targets, reach the objective of having this district be the innovative, rigorous, achievement gap reducing, student needs meeting district that we want it to be. We're going to be constrained, and that was a word I think I heard Maria use. We're going to be constrained constantly and be in these situations where we're going to have to be contorting ourselves into very uncomfortable positions. Because we've been here before. And it's a cycle I wish that we would just get out of. I don't know what it's going to take to change this course that we're on, but it's clear that there is a course correction needed. So how do we get there? Again, not waxing poetic, and I'm not going to proselytize and say what I would do as mayor, because I'm not. I am going to point out some additional realities, which is we have an outgoing mayor in front of us. An outgoing mayor who, like it or not, she gets to decide what this district gets. Does that mean we are silent? No. We can certainly assert what we need. We can certainly push back, whether gently or otherwise, against what this district deserves, what our students and staff deserve. But again, we have to work within the constraints of our allocation first. And the reason I put it that way, Chris, is because I would posit that there is a riff on your three choices. And we did that a couple of years ago. We passed a budget that none of us liked. And we then added in a, what is the word? I can't think of it. A resolution, or yes. We said exactly what it was that we wanted. We advocated hard for the things that we couldn't live without. And we did let go of some of the things that we would have loved to have kept. It's back to Rajiv's starting point the other day when we first started our budget discussions, that we are going to have to give up a little bit of what we want to do right now. And the mayor is going to have to, we would like her to,
recording stopped
from where she would like to be right now. And so until we can get that infusion that corrects this cycle, I think that's where we are. That's where I am, at least. And so I don't want anyone to misconstrue or mischaracterize my position as being a lack of that chutzpah, that advocacy, that whatever you call it, that says our schools need what they need and our students and staff deserve what they deserve. That's not where I am. My point is, how do we get there? Doing our job as a school committee, fiscally responsible school committee, and how do we make sure that we can sustain it over time? That's it. So, thank you.
Thanks, Tamika. Paul?
Thanks, Chris. President Eisenhower
recording in progress.
President Eisenhower used to say that when you have a tough negotiation and you're having trouble reaching an agreement, what you should do is make it more complicated, which is kind of counterintuitive. But what he meant by that is to look beyond the instant disagreement, which often seems intractable, and look for other options that make it possible for the parties to come to an agreement. I think we might be in that situation right now where we have to make it a little more complicated. I know, Chris, you've been urging us to focus on this year. And there's a good reason for you to have said that. But I think it's more complicated than that. I think there are long-term patterns of costs and programs and revenues that have to be looked at. Whether it's Mayor Fuller looking at things from her point of view or a new mayor looking at it starting January 1st, a mayor has an obligation to find a sustainable solution, not only for the school district, but for the city as a whole. Likewise, Anna, from her seat as superintendent, has to look at a long-term growth and improvement plan for the schools, one that's consistent with the educational and social needs of the children, but also the working conditions and the environment for the teachers and the other staff. And I think if we just look at this as a one-year proposition, as opposed to making it a bit more complicated and looking at it as the first step in a new multi-year vision for the schools and for the finances of the schools, that we might find there's room for agreement. Yes, a little give and take on both sides, but a commonly shared vision for the community, bolstered by a long-term financial plan that is sensible for the city and for the schools. I think Anna's been an incredibly strong advocate for the kinds of programs we've heard about today, and expanding those and building in curriculum improvements, improved professional development, greater use of formative assessments and the data that come out of those assessments, and indeed a kind of accountability for all of us involved in the schools that frankly hasn't been there for a very, very long time, which then leads to individual parents saying, you're not delivering what I need for my child in general education. So I'm either going to go to private school, or as Rajiv was suggesting before, I'm going to get the evaluation and try to get my kid into special ed so that the child can get what I think they need. So to that extent, the system has been broken for quite a while. And I think we all share a hope that it will be fixed, but we all know that it's going to take several years to get there. But we can't get there if we don't have a common vision of the underlying finances that would support that. And if we also don't have a sense of the timetable that Anna needs to get us there as well. And so, Chris, I think your idea of postponing a vote is a wise one, because I think we need a few more weeks to get there. My one plea would be to everybody involved, whether in the school system, in City Hall, or among the public, is to avoid frontal attacks and questioning people's good intentions, or even questioning their judgment in how each of them is doing her job. I think we have to get past that and understand that there is a common vision to be created here, and that we have the wherewithal as a community in terms of intelligence and creativity and indeed financing in the long run to get us there. So Chris, I think your idea of spending a bit more time working together is well stated, is appropriate and timely. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Mayor Fuller?
Appreciate everybody's sentiments tonight, and perhaps not the first speaker tonight who certainly called me, I think, a liar, ignorant, and uncaring, all within a couple of sentences. Allison, who's still in our audience, Paul just mentioned it too. Across our parent body, across our staff, across the school committee, I think there are caring people who have a shared vision for improving everything that we can do for all of the different types of learners. And I just want to reiterate, like everybody else, Dr. Colby, your work is important and meaningful. And I just do want to shout out, remind people, she started 10 years ago on this journey. So this is, it's been supported and encouraged and lifted up by our current superintendent. But this is Newton. And yes, Christine Dutt, who's still in the room too. I'm here to collaborate and figure this out together. Couple thoughts, though, just as we work our way through this. Spent a tremendous amount of time on the entire city's finances. What we can do with the allocation in the NPS stabilization fund is really set. And I have prioritized NPS again, as I always have. So we really are looking at free cash, which is one-time funding. All of us are moved and impressed by the MTSS work. It is not one time. It isn't even 1 year for one grade. It's ongoing, necessary, and important work that needs to stay in place in the 5 elementary schools where it is, broaden to the other 10, move up to the 4 middles. And it's it isn't even just one grade that was impacted by the pandemic, it's multiple ages. So this is a systematic issue with systematic needs. The superintendent talked about that, I think, on Monday night. So free cash is going to be declining next year. It's not an ongoing support. So as we brainstorm on good and useful, meaningful ways to use one-time funding, we're going to just have to be very careful and thoughtful, and I know everybody will be. I do want to just mention it is the right of the school committee to vote initially for a budget that's higher than the allocation, and I understand the strong desire to do so. However, once the city council finishes its deliberations and a final allocation, including the NPS stabilization fund, is set, the school committee legally cannot have a budget that exceeds that amount. So the hard decisions will have to be made. It's literally illegal to start the school year with the fiscal year with a voted on budget that is higher. It's illegal. Plus, I'll just say that we are not Brockton, but that's actually what happened in Brockton, where a decision was made to spend more money than was in the coffers. And that is not what any of us intend to do or will do. I am confident that we will understand what our budget is, and we will all have to vote. It will be reluctant. I'll be a reluctant vote yes on that, on a balanced budget. At some point, it's a question of whether It's in April or May or June, but it has to be before July 1st. So the three options that Chris outlined, you can do it for some early votes, but you can't do it. It has to be balanced at some point before July 1st comes. But I look forward to working with everybody on the one-time funds. And Chris and I talked first thing this morning. Wouldn't surprise me if we talk again first thing tomorrow morning and the day after and the day after. And we'll keep working it through to see the best that we can do for our students and our teachers.
Thank you. Ping.
Well, I have these very passionate and eloquent comments. It's hard to follow, and this is a certain difficult topic. Last time I did not say anything at the final comment about the overall budget issue. But one thing is clear. Just a moment ago when the public comments mentioned, hey, I came to Newton because public education. Now all the flashback of during the strike, we heard probably hundreds of letters. Majority letters said, parents told us, that's the reason we moved here. And I could add that that's the reason I decided to stay in Newton. My son came here 3 years old. I learned this is the best place to stay in Boston area for education. So, and clearly, the luster of Newton Public School education has lost quite a bit during the strike, particularly. Even before that, the COVID era, when many parents complained why we could not open the school. But strike time was most difficult and was very difficult for me as well as educator when I'm meeting people and they ask that question. So seems it's coming back, and Paul said, you know, when we are in difficult negotiation, it makes things more complicated. So I'm thinking, how can we make things more complicated? But certainly, I reviewed quickly Dr. Nolan's kind of new presentation about what's the name, I should say, you know, try to, give us a picture of the less than level service budget. That's the worst out of the all 5 scenarios. This is the worst. And still could not get the balanced budget, still short of over 1 million. With all these cuts, and possibly I would suggest that Dr. Nolan could briefly summarize what could it be cuts and let people know if we go to that less than level service budget, what will be severe and grave consequences. And even so, still we could not balance the budget. So that was really, really sobering. And also, you know, among that cuts, the OSS, the Office of Student Service and Special Education took the most cut, right? Almost at 1 million. Is that 1 million? 31.6% of all the possible cuts, and that's yes, over 1 million, 1.173 million cuts. And we could imagine, and Newton is well known for special education and student services, and what kind of consequence this would have. And we heard all the wonderful things about MTSS. Now this will be first, you know, impact. So I'm wondering, one simple proposal I could make here is possibly we could write the open letter to the community. We are in this budget battle, okay? And, because I think we will receive letters very soon when, parents, committee members are watching tonight, and we will see the letters. We need to give some kind of some bullet points, what could it be scenarios? And I don't know if this sounds like put a pressure on mayor's office. Well, so be it. We have to do this now. This is the time. And, even though I have to admit, I'm kind of coming from different culture, I'm a little bit on the fiscal conservative side. I'm willing to public admit that. I said privately to many people, I appreciate that kind of approach. You don't overspend. And this country and this culture certainly taught me quite a lesson. And sometimes you have to overspend because that's for the benefits of the development, for your growth. You cannot always be conservative. Like the farmers, they always save a little bit money for next year because something will go wrong and all that. That's Chinese 1,000 years agricultural society. And I spent 10 years in the rural area, so I learned that. So again, I'm kind of to master my energy and getting ready for a big fight. And now seems looking at what Dr. Nolan within 48 hours and give us this presentation. You said made a good use of 48 hours. I was impressed. Whole team give us what could be the picture if we did not get enough money. If we go to the less than level service budget, even so, we're still short of $1 million. Now, with all those cuts. So my last suggestion, probably Dr. Nolan, you could go through quickly to give us a kind of reality check. If we do not have enough money, what will happen? And we probably use that to tell the community, write some letter, it's coming, and appeal to the mayor's office and city council to see if all those decision makers can think twice. So, thank you.
Thank you, An Ping. I'll just share my thoughts quickly as in terms of where we are. And not to open up a debate on this evening, Mayor Fuller, but we can discuss later the legality of how things move forward. I know our general counsel put out a memo 2 years ago, which the whole committee has on our responsibilities. So maybe we'll have that discussion. I think one thing that I think is really important and why would, as Paul referenced, I kind of had this mentality of let's think about getting through this year is, however we do that, whether we do that by, we live off of the fumes of one-time funds again, or whatever means, yeah, that doesn't solve our structural problem, but cutting $3 million from our budget doesn't solve our structural problem either. That's a reality we live with. That's a reality that was known in December 2023 when we put the education stabilization plan together, that it wasn't going to get us there, and there was going to be this hole, and we'd either have to find some way to wring efficiency out of the system or find incremental funds or some combination of the two. And it was known, and no one should be surprised to hear that $3 million isn't going to fix the problem. So that was kind of my mentality. But Paul, I think you framed it in a kind of interesting way, in particularly with what we heard tonight about the investments we're making, which, as I've gone through this process so far, you know, it's just such a hard thing to say, yeah, well, look, we know this is, it's good for students. We know it's, you know, intuitively you could see how, hey, look, this could pay financial dividends in the long term, in addition to being the best thing we can do for our kids. And it fills this hole that we all know exists between general education and special education that's been lacking here for a long, long time. So we knew all those things, and, you know, you can advocate for it, but you really couldn't put no, it was a hard argument to make in some respects. And I think it's an easier argument to make now. And yeah, this is all, you know, very, you know, preliminary data, but I mean, it's very promising data. And so you know, I think the way Paul framed it a little bit, of thinking about it as that first step in a new vision, and the way a lot of folks have talked about it as an investment, I think is maybe shifting my thinking a little bit about, you know, how to make that case. I still, under no circumstances, think that going backwards is the answer, particularly because I believe the money is there. And I believe there are levers to pull, and I've talked about it many times. And so there still is value in seeing this through till we get to that great big grand solution, and we can put that plan in place that doesn't have the structural gap towards the end of it. But, you know, thinking about, let's go make cuts now so that maybe we're going to hopefully add them back, just doesn't resonate with me. It doesn't make sense in any way, and it's not something that I'm willing to do. I think there's one final point I want to make, which I've certainly made before at this table, and it's something I feel strongly about. COVID came up a couple times tonight, which is the first time I think we've really heard people talking about COVID in some time, thankfully, in a school setting. A lot of what's happened in our schools, and a lot of the difficulty, and a lot of the complexity, and that entire shift of students leaving our district and those general education classroom teacher numbers going down, but those special education and aides numbers going way up, because we are just dealing with an entirely different level of complexity. And it's just different today than it was as recently as you know, 5 years ago. That is in part based on the decisions of the 9 people who were sitting around this table at that time. And whether you believe that was absolutely necessary from a societal perspective, or whether you believe, as I do, that children bore too much of the burden for the sake of adults, the reality is that is a big part of the reason we're sitting here today having this discussion. And I think that is not to be lost. So with that, I think if no one else has any further comments, my plan would be we keep Monday's meeting on the calendar, and subject to how things develop over the next several days, maybe that meeting happens, maybe that meeting gets canceled, and we'll reschedule for when we think we have something more productive to talk about. Again, it's from my perspective, I'm willing to let the discussion take as long as it takes to get to a solution that is something that I think this committee can live with. So I know that's uncertainty in timing and process, but I don't know that there's a better solution. Tamika?
So just listening to you, a thought occurred to me, which is, I know folks on the committee have their preferred path kind of already thought out, fleshed out. I'm wondering if it would be beneficial to make a pro-con type of case, which is something that you alluded to just a minute ago. You said you'd rather not make cuts now and hope that we add them back later. And it struck me that we're essentially doing the same, but in reverse. And let me explain. The superintendent's proposal would have us make an aspirational budget now and hope that the mayor will be able to fulfill that budget later. And if she doesn't, we'll be right back in the scenario where we're going to have to make cuts. And so I'm wondering if anyone has a thoughtful, cogent way of explaining how we avoid that in either regard. So does any, I can explain a little bit more, but that's where I think the question is, are we doing now what will have to be done later, or are we avoiding that but still ending up in the same place? And so this is it's a gambit, it's a strategy to get us to a better place. But my question is, if that strategy doesn't work, aren't we going to be in the same place and at a later point in time? And how do we deal with that?
So, I have thoughts.
I am, thank you. Tamika, I see your point, and I was going to say to Chris, which relates to your point, while all these discussions are going on with the mayor and Anna and the like, I would find it very helpful to keep, not that we need extra meetings, but keep the Monday night meeting to just in case we have further questions about the late breaking submissions Anna has given us in response to our questions. Because Tamika, I don't think we can get to your issues unless we have a full understanding of her answers. We said to her, in essence, what would you cut to get down to the allocation? And she's given us a kind of a list and an explanation. I for one, would really like to understand better what's behind what she's given us, not because I necessarily want to adopt it, but to understand her thought pattern and the analysis behind it. We might not need those, but if we do need them, I'd like to really, I think the time would be well spent to understand it. Maybe we do those, well, we can do it in this form of meeting, or we could do it in a workshop kind of meeting also. But, you look at the charts and it's really hard to feel tangibly what they would mean in the classroom. So Chris, I personally would find that valuable. I don't think doing that would resolve anything on Monday night, but I think it would be useful background information for us to have if the group feels that way. If the group doesn't feel that way, I'm also very comfortable just meeting individually with Anna or whoever she delegates to go through those charts. So whatever you think best on that. But Tamika, I think I see your point. I worry that if we try to answer your question right now, we're going to find ourselves a bit too locked in to one resolution versus another for this stage of the negotiations. So I'd be very wary of that. You're right that sooner or later that decision has to be made, for sure. You're right about that. But it doesn't feel quite right to me to do that yet.
Thanks, Paul. And look, I'm perfectly willing if folks want to meet on Monday, if they think that would be helpful. I'm by no means saying we shouldn't. I just feel all I was saying was if we're still, in a process and there's folks feel like they don't have a lot to talk about, then I don't want to waste anyone's time either. So, but I'm happy to defer to the committee on that. Did you have something to respond to?
If I can.
Yes, please. And then Rajiv.
I do just want to say, especially to the public and to our staff, that, we did spend a pretty brisk 48 hours trying to get where we got, and we still have not closed the gap that we were asked to do because we were rushing, and there are people on the other end of these cuts and programs that we care about. And I just want to say how damaging it is to put people's positions on here. What I've given you already constitutes 28.8 FTE of people being eliminated from our, now we know that it's not just about FTEs, but I have to talk about that because I have a whole staff that is watching this and is reading this and knows it's worse than this. So I guess I just want to say that. I also want to say I don't want to have some sort of showdown like this if we don't have to. So if there's some way we're working this out that I don't know about, I want to do it because this isn't good for the organization. And it's also not good for the larger community. I'm reading a lot of Chinese philosophers because I'm back in connection with our Chinese school and we're challenging each other to read things. And a quote from Confucius this week I read was, "Education breeds confidence, confidence breeds hope, hope breeds peace." And I don't know about you, but I think that our public schools are the solution to what's ailing us right now. I mean, our central office, for the most part, grew up poor, and public education was the way we got to these seats. And we believe in it so deeply, and we want to invest in it so much that we're not suggesting we do anything illegal. We want Liam to fill out his account balances on July 1 and do so with total integrity, and we will do that no matter what. That said, I'll be darned if we are not going to push at every level to get the maximum amount that we can have and send that message to everybody in the city about that, because, and I think the mayor would want to do that too. She cares about education. She has to look across a lot of other landscapes. I get that. I've been trained by other mayors and other town managers to ignore that and to do what we have to do. And we're not each other, right? And so we're modeling what it looks like to do two hard jobs. And so I'm doing mine. And I'm saying that we push all the way and we go all the way to the mat. And then we say, we're not going to do anything illegal. But what if we take it all the way and almost get the touchdown? I just can't give it up. I can't. So you need to know that even with $1 million still left to close, we're at 28.8 FTE. It degrades some of what we talked about tonight. It doesn't decimate it all. We are trying not to touch the classroom. But the next $1 million, I'm going to need guidance on things like, are we going to cut into athletics? Are we going to remove music programs? Things that we don't want children to have to give any more tax for this time. And so I just want to say that, and we can certainly have any kind of discussion on Monday we want about that, but everyone's listening and watching, and if we don't have to do that, let's not do it, because it is really a lot more cuts. It's 4.5 million or 3.7 million, depending on what we do with the kindergarten aides. And I guess I do want to say, Chair Bresky, that we did get a notice this week about the full day K aides, and I feel like I need to say this here because I heard it said at a union meeting publicly, so it's sort of out there that our decision has been delayed till July now, and a litigation update is coming to you from Jill shortly. We just couldn't schedule it for today. So it puts another complicated layer on that decision. And I want to just be real clear about that because it's out in the community already. So with that, I'm happy to do whatever scheduling and discussion you would like. I guess I need to also some direction because I can't do another like 24 to 48 hour like showdown with the staff. If we are really closing this gap, like we're going to start tomorrow. And I guess we just want some direction about that. Should we continue to do that or no?
Yep, go ahead.
For me, what's really helpful are some quiet discussions, Anna, Liam, Chris, Emily, on free cash opportunities, prioritized order of magnitudes, and that may be helpful with operating budgets. Some of it won't, but those, if we can have some of those quiet discussions, obviously we'll have to come back to the school committee and eventually off to the city council as well. But those, I think, are particularly fruitful discussions to have in the next few days.
Chris?
Yep, Paul, go ahead.
I'm going to withdraw, in light of what Anna said, I'm going to withdraw my suggestion to spend Monday night's meeting on going through her submissions. And I guess I would just say that I'd like personally the opportunity just to spend a little time perhaps with Liam going over the numbers rather than to have a public discussion. And that way you're free to have the quiet conversations that Ruth Ann was saying.
Okay.
So, Chris, along that, I actually liked your suggestion, Paul. I was, I was looking for some additional context on some of the reductions that were put forward as well. And in fact, I thought that's what we would have discussed tonight. So I'm a little disappointed we didn't get to that. And I think perhaps a way to split the baby, I hate that expression, is maybe to have another document where we're sharing questions, getting the answers submitted there, and then of course making that a part of our public process. That way we can all be availing ourselves of your and mine, whomever's thoughtful questions.
Okay, how about this? Why don't, on that topic, Anna and I and Emily will put our heads together and figure out some path that we can have questions answered. I think I share what Dr. Nolan said in terms of being determined to see that those cuts don't happen and therefore not to dwell on them and create what I kind of see as an unnecessary sense of panic, and knowing that uncertainty is just such a morale killer in any organization. So we'll think through what the best path forward is. Rajiv?
Chris, I think you just articulated what I was about to say. I think it's premature to meet with groups of our staff and let them know that they will be the target of a RIF, because we're not there. I think everyone who works for the school district understands that we're going through a difficult budget process, but there's still a long way to go, and it's just going to raise anxiety levels at a point where I don't think decisions have been made. Actually, I know decisions have not been made. So that's one thing. My initial response was going to be to Tamika's question, right, around the different approaches. As we all know, it comes down to, can we increase funding, whether that's through free cash or through, which would have to be relatively soon, or through another infusion from the Education Stabilization Fund, which does not have to be soon, which can happen really at any point the mayor decides that something could be allocated. And then, of course, with expenses, we've been looking at reducing capital expenses and expenses for materials and things like that. I don't know that there's much to shift there. Other operating expenses, and then of course a reduction in force, which I think there's no appetite for that. Key issue to think about is around timing, because other than deciding what happens with free cash flow for this year, all the rest can, if they have to, take place at different times. And I think that's what has to factor into our thinking. You know, if we're in a situation where we need another infusion of funding from the ESF, that may not be until sometime next year. That could be a different discussion. And there may be a stronger case to be made for it, and more successes to highlight, for that. So again, these are factors to think about. I think timing is something that could potentially work in our favor. But, again, especially in terms of free cash flow, as Mayor Fuller said, the quiet conversations and a clear and crisp articulation of what's being asked for, the benefits, and so on, I think will be very helpful. So we should absolutely do that. I'm willing to join if you think at whatever point it might be helpful.
Okay, great, thank you. And that reminds me, I didn't respond to your initial question, that we kind of got off track there, Tamika, in terms of is this now or later? And so I should probably do that. I think that question really comes down to whether you believe there is funding available. And I mean available out there, available, not necessarily, available in the sense of it's going to be allocated right now. I think that's the key to asking that answering that question. I firmly believe it is available, and I think that's coming from it's coming from an educated place making that statement. So to me, that's the value in the real value in saying you're effectively going to live to fight another day, and you're going to fix this big problem that we all know is out there, and then that's going to put you on the sustainable path forward. If you're wrong, then maybe you are in that spot where, you're doing in the future what you would otherwise do today, but you're, marginally worse off, no worse off. I mean, it's, there's value in that time. So that would be my perspective on that. Yep. Mayor Fuller?
Add perhaps one more thing that we should ask for in the next few days, particularly in light of your suggestion. May I suggest that Jill Murray, who's the solicitor for the schools, be in touch with the city solicitor folks or outside legal counsel or whatever it is. I would like to clarify and make sure everybody has the same understanding about whether come July 1st, the Newton Public Schools can start spending more money than has been allocated to the schools and be on a trajectory to spend more. I am quite confident that that is not possible. A vote could be taken before then, hoping that more funding is there. But why don't we have the lawyers clarify that particular suggestion so that all of us understand what is legal and not legal when an allocation is confirmed or voted on by the city council for the Newton Public Schools.
I don't hear anybody suggesting that, Mayor Fuller. I hear people suggesting that if you are the backstop, then you will be the backstop, instead of the school committee being the backstop before you are the backstop.
I'm hearing it slightly differently. Doesn't mean I'm hearing it correctly, but I'm hearing the suggestion by, I think, some people that just go ahead and start spending as if there's additional funding and see what happens, and hope that somehow additional funding materializes during next school year. I thought I heard that. Maybe I misunderstood. That certainly, I hope I didn't hear that, but the plan, the superintendent has to have a plan in place that matches the funding that is available by the last day in June before the fiscal year starts, is my understanding. It sounds like it's the superintendent's understanding. If we're all on the same page, then we don't need to ask the lawyers anything. If some other school committee members have a different understanding, then maybe it'd be useful to clarify. Thank you.
Ping.
First of all, I'd like to thank in advance of your busy following few days, including weekend. And, you know, spring is coming and people might enjoy, you know, other things, but this is so critical. So I'd like to thank you, and it's not easy. And also, I think we have been reminded again and again, there are two words people are not happy: trust and transparency. Now, these both key concepts are now really on table. And, you know, many people, I would say, I don't know what's the percentage, probably do not know the full picture of what's the school budget current, the battle, because there are a lot of details. Every day we have more details. And so again, as I mentioned, that people said, you know, I came here for Newton. Newton should have enough money, and why you can't do that? Are you doing your duty? Are you doing your job? We are being challenged even tonight, and based on public comments. So that's the thing I think we should have made it very clear. And hopefully we'll have some good discussion in the following few days. We don't need to go public, have an open battle, you know, school committee, the city hall, mayor's office, or city council. But just in case, if we cannot have very productive negotiation, you know, educate the public. What's the reality now? And so this way, everybody, hopefully, if they're reading the news, reading the open letter and the other media, on the same page. And I don't know, might be a little bit difficult, if not ugly, but at least probably pave the way for the future for the new city leadership to think about the override. Because this is real. And with last time, people said, we did not know that. No one give us a clear communication. This time, we give you, everybody see that. And that's the consequences. And that decision, I think the mayor remind us very clearly, legal issue, balance. And no one wants to go to jail, by the way. And especially our leaders. And I don't think, but again, I heard you, Mayor, and you remind us multiple times, so has to be balanced budget. And so that's also, I've been struggling for past week or longer. And, you know, you don't want to have a grandstanding, okay, we support education if you know there's no money. So that kind of things, I hate to do that. We are all educational. We should be reasonable and thoughtful. And also, we were reminded 2 words. Someone mentioned the public comment: bold, creative. It's easy at this time to be bold. Yes, let's get the money, but creative, probably I add word thoughtful. And I know time is very limited now, only a few days left or a week or so. But let's hope that we work really hard. And we know that the environment is not very favorable at this moment with all things going on nationally, statewide, and locally. And there might be more cuts from the federal government down the road. So, but again, I appreciate you guys are taking this tough battle, but also honest battle, and let's see if we can come up with something. And again, I think we need to educate the public, let them know. And so we don't need to hear those words again. Where's the trust? Where's transparency? And where's your courage? All those things, we are not, getting away our duties. We are doing our duties, and different approaches, different philosophy. I think I can take that. But we are all doing our duties and try our best. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Anping. All right, if there's no other comments, and if you want transparency, everyone gets to watch this slow motion train wreck play out in real time. You can't get any more transparent than that. So maybe with that, we will, we've fulfilled our agenda for this evening. We'll adjourn, and we will be in touch on next scheduling. And Dr. Nolan, I guess, can we commit, whatever scheduling occurs, we'll make sure that is sent to all the families and all the staff.
Yes.
Okay, thanks, everybody.
Re-